Assalamualaikum and hello everyone. How are you feeling today? Are you ready for today's lesson? Well, we are going to continue with the topic on description of graphs and charts. And the objective of the lesson is to identify and create suitable graphs and charts to be used. I'm sure all of you have conducted your survey and you have all the data ready. So, now how are you going to present the data? Well, the best way is through the use of visual representations. Using visual representations to present data from surveys or other evaluation activities makes them easier to understand. Bar graphs, pie charts, and line graphs are an excellent way to illustrate your survey results. Graphs and charts condense large amounts of information into easy-to-understand formats that clearly and effectively communicate important points. In selecting how best to present your data, think about the purpose of your graph or chart and what you want to present. Then decide which variables you want to include and whether they should be expressed as frequencies, percentages, or categories. Now, how to choose which type of graph to use? Let me explain further. When you decide what kind of graph or chart best illustrates your data, you should consider what type of data you are working with. Categorical data are grouped into non-overlapping categories such as grade, race, and yes or no response. Bar graphs, line graphs, and pie charts are useful for displaying the categorical data. I will begin with pie chart. What is pie chart? A pie chart is a circular chart used to compare parts of a whole. It is divided into sectors that are equal in size to the quantity represented. Once you have collected your raw data, you need to present it in a diagram such as a pie chart. But firstly, you need to know the parts of pie chart. Most pie charts contain these parts or labels. Sometimes, you may find pie charts where a few parts or labels are not included. The common parts of labels are as follows. Title, which is a brief summary of the report. Sections, which show the data collected graphically in percentages. Legend, which shows the key for the slices. Explanatory notes that explain the relevant additional information. And source of information, which indicates the source of the data. Now let us look at this example. In a survey, 100 school students were asked to name their favorite movie. The results are shown in this pie chart. Based on the first pie chart, EastEnders was the most popular movie, while in another school, The Model was the most popular movie. Well, students, you need to remember, the larger the number, the larger the angle in the pie chart is. So students, I think you are now ready to draw the pie chart. Let's begin. Look at this record of traffic traveling down a particular road. To draw a pie chart, we need to represent each part of the data as a proportion of 360 because there are 360 degrees in a circle. For example, if 55 out of 270 vehicles are vans, we will represent this on the circle as a segment with an angle of 55 over 270 times 360 equal to 73 degrees. This will give the following results. The data is represented on this pie chart. Now, let's try this question. 90 people were asked which newspaper they read. 45 read the Daily Bugle, 20 read England Today, 15 read another paper, 10 do not read a paper. Calculate the number of degrees required to represent each answer in a pie chart. Now let's check the answer. Did you get all correct? This pie chart is drawn stage by stage and make sure to label your pie chart with suitable title, legend, and any other relevant information. Last but not least, these are the guidelines for formatting graphs and charts.
Hi students, In this unit, we will learn how to identify and create suitable graphs and charts to be used. Different types of graph are used for different situations. There are 4 basic presentation types that you can use to present your data: comparison, composition, distribution, and relationship. Let's try this out. Try to state the best graph for presenting the following data. Now let's check the answers. Did you get them right? How to go about it? How to choose which type of graph to use? Let us begin by looking at the line graph. What is a line graph? A line graph, which is also known as a line chart, is a type of chart used to visualize the value of something over time. Now, since the line graphs are normally used to track changes over short and long periods of time, you might want to use a line graph if you want to show a trend over time, or if you have information that changes continuously over time. For example, the amount of cash, sales or profit, monthly rainfall, and annual unemployment rates. The line graph consists of a horizontal x-axis and a vertical y-axis. The x-axis of a line graph shows the occurrences and the categories being compared over time, and the y-axis represents the scale, which is a set of numbers that represents the data and is organized into equal intervals. Now that we're familiar with the parts of a line graph, let's continue to look at how we can create a line graph. In order to create a line graph, you need to first create a table. Draw the x and y axis on the page. On the top of the page, place a title that briefly describes the purpose of the chart. Next, you need to label each axis. If time is one of the factors, it should go along the horizontal x-axis. The other numeric values measured should be placed along the vertical y-axis. Each axis should be labeled with the name of the numeric system as well as the measurements being used. For example, you may label the x-axis with time in bracket days, indicating that each number written on the axis is the number of days. Divide each axis evenly into applicable increments. Next, you need to add data. Data for a line graph is usually contained in a 2-column table corresponding to the x and y axis. Lastly, do not forget to create a key that identifies what each line is by its color. If you are comparing multiple items, do you still remember the function of a line graph? Well, from the first line itself, you can already identify the type of graph which is intended. Yes, this graph is used to show the price per share of Coke over a 6-year period. So obviously this is a line graph. Next, you need to read the description carefully and extract the keywords and figures from the description. You can put the details in a table like this. Once the table is ready, you can then draw the graph. Don't forget that you need to have a title, x-axis, y-axis, complete labels, and the key on your graph. Well, that's all about it.
What is bar graph? Basically, you can imagine a graph that consists bars on it. If you have comparative data that you would like to represent through a chart, then a bar graph would be the best option. This type of graph is one of the more familiar options as it is easy to interpret. Bar graphs are the visual data using bars of different heights to compare data among categories. They may run horizontally or vertically. Bar graphs display data in a way that is similar to line graphs. When studying bar graphs, you should ask first, what is the subject of the graph? Next, how are the various parts relate to the subject? And what are the relative percentages that each bar represents? A bar graph will always have 2 axes, which explain, first, numerical values. Number 2, the types of categories being compared. When studying a bar graph, you should take note on these parts. First, title. Title tells who and what the graph is about. Next, y-axis. It tells what is being counted. and it has number for the amount of staff being measured. For example, number of students and sales. Next is x-axis, or known as horizontal axis. It explains the information on a graph and shows things being compared. On x-axis, there are categories that tells specific type of data. Next, the bars. The bars accurately show the data collected. The taller or the longer bar, the more value it has. Next is the scale. The scale tells amount of data and starts with 0. Next, the background is called the grid. It helps you to read the units. And last but not least is the legend. The legend works as the key of the categories. There are 3 types of bar graph. First, vertical bar graph. Second, horizontal bar graph. Third, stacked bar graph. Let us look at the vertical bar graph. It is the graph that can go up and down. It is particularly useful for time series data. The space for labels on the x-axis is small, so it is ideal for years, hours, or months. Next, horizontal bar graph. It is the graph that can go across and uses the y-axis, which is vertical line, for labeling. Therefore, there is more room to fit text labels for categorical variables on the y-axis. Besides, this graph is the best method to present the information because the labels, which is in this case the excuses, are too long to appear clearly on the x-axis. Next is stacked bar graph. In stacked bar graph, the bars representing the subgroups are placed on top of each other to make a single column. The overall height or length of the bar shows the total size of the category, whilst different colors or shadings are used to indicate the relative contribution of the different subgroups. Horizontal, vertical, and stacked bar graph guidelines. You should keep the following guidelines in mind when creating your own bar graphs. Make bars and columns wider than the space between them. Do not allow grid lines to pass through columns or bars. Use a simple font type on a graph. Try to maintain a consistent font style from graph to graph in a single presentation or document. Simple sans serif fonts are preferable. The difference between bar graph and histogram. Bar graphs are very good when your data is in categories such as comedy, drama, and so on. But when you have continuous data such as a person's height, then use a histogram. It is best to leave gaps between the bars of a bar graph, so it doesn't look like a histogram. How to create a bar graph? First, you have to collect your data. Next, you have to draw an X and Y axis. This obviously will look like a large L shape. Number 3, you have to label the X-axis. For example, you can label the X-axis with the names of each of the months you will be using, from January until December. Next, you have to label the Y-axis. Then, you can draw the bars. After that, you can write the title of the graph. Next, you can label the legend according to the bars or the categories that you have made earlier. Lastly, you can interpret the data. Now that you have made your bar graph, you can have a better sense of the data because you can visualize it. Now, let us look at the activity.
So students, we are almost at the end of our lesson. Last but not least, these are the guidelines for formatting graphs and charts. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. See you again and have a nice day.